Hello and welcome to Theater Operations Unleashed, the monthly show that explores the ins and outs of theater operations, management, facilities, and design. I'm your host, Raymond Kent. In each episode, we will be focusing on management, operations, design, trends, and best practices in the performing arts. I hope to bring you both insights from my 4 decades in the industry, as well as engaging conversations with theater professionals about the challenges and rewards of their work. We'll also cover a wide range of topics from budgeting and scheduling to marketing and audience development, theater technology, and many other related topics. Whether you're a theater maker yourself or just interested in the industry, I hope you'll find this podcast informative and inspiring. So sit back, relax, or lean in, and let's dive into the world of theater. Welcome to Theater Operations Unleashed. I'm Raymond Kent, and today we're beginning a new journey, one that will unfold over many episodes as we explore accessibility in the performing arts. If you work in theater operations, design, production, or arts leadership, you already know that accessibility isn't just a technical requirement. It's a cultural shift. It's a rethinking of who the arts are for, who gets to participate, and who gets to shape the stories we tell. This first episode of many lays the groundwork in the history behind the work, the long arc of how disability has been understood, misunderstood, represented, and too often excluded from the performing arts. Future episodes will go deeper into the practical side, accessible stage houses, backstage environments, policies, technology, and design. But today, we're asking a simpler question. How did we get here? For most of Western history, society has been built around a very narrow idea of what a body should be able to do. Walk without assistance, see clearly, hear reliably, process information in predictable ways. And the performing arts, our theaters, rehearsal rooms, and backstage corridors, were designed with that same assumption. Not because anyone set out to exclude people, but because the people designing those spaces never imagined anyone outside that template needing to use them. That's not how exclusion happens. Not through hostility, but through invisibility. When we talk about accessibility today, we're not just talking about ramps and captioning. We're talking about undoing centuries of design, decisions based on a single imagined body, the proverbial quote-unquote normal body, and replacing them with decisions based on the full range of the human experience. If we go back to antiquity, disability wasn't a unified category. People were understood through religious, moral, or supernatural frameworks. In ancient Greece, physical perfection was idealized. Yet Greek theater, the birthplace of Western drama, featured characters like Tiresias, the blind prophet, and Hephaestus, the lame god of the forge. These figures weren't metaphors for tragedy. They were powerful, central, and necessary. But representation didn't equal access. Theaters weren't built for disabled bodies, and society wasn't either. By the medieval period, disability was often framed as sin, punishment, or divine testing. The church provided charity, but charity came with dependence. Disabled people were recipients, not agents. And performance reflected that worldview. Disabled characters were jokes, warnings, or curiosities, rarely full humans with full lives. The 1800s brought 2 major forces that shaped disability culture for generations. First, institutions, the asylums, poorhouses, schools for the blind and deaf. And second, exhibitions, the freak shows, dime museums, curiosities. Institutions were framed as humanitarian. Some truly were. Schools like the American School for the Deaf created real opportunities and helped build deaf culture. But asylums also confined thousands of people in isolation, often for life. Exhibitions were even more complicated. They exploited disabled bodies, yes, but some performers, they negotiated their own terms and built careers. Still, the cultural message stuck. Disabled people were objects to be looked at, not subjects with agency. And that message seeped into the performing arts. It shaped casting. It shaped storytelling. It shaped who was allowed to be seen. The World Wars changed the political landscape. Suddenly, large numbers of disabled veterans returned home, people whose disabilities were tied to national service. This led to the rise of the rehabilitation model. Disability is something to fix, something to overcome, something to normalize. Rehabilitation brought real benefits: prosthetics, therapy, vocational training. But it also reinforced the idea that disability was a medical problem, not a social one. And the arts reflected that. Stories about disability became stories about triumph, struggle, or inspiration, not stories about identity, culture, or community. Even Franklin Roosevelt felt compelled to hide his paralysis from the public. That tells you everything about the era's expectations. The modern disability movement didn't come from doctors or charities. It came from disabled people themselves. The independent living movement at Berkeley, the 504 sit-ins, including the 28-day occupation of the San Francisco Federal Building. Judith Heumann and a generation of activists who reframed disability as a civil rights issue. And of course, the Capitol Crawl, a moment of political theater that forced the nation to confront the barriers built into its own architecture. These actions didn't just change laws, they changed the conversation. They shifted disability from a medical issue to a civil rights issue, from how do we fix people to how do we fix systems. One of the most powerful outcomes of the disability rights movement was the rise of the disability arts. Not art therapy, not accessible programming, but art created by disabled artists, rooted in disability culture. Companies like Access Dance Company, Theater Breaking Through Barriers, and Kinetic Light are just a few examples. These artists aren't asking for accommodation, they're redesigning the artistic landscape. They're showing us that disability isn't a limitation on creativity, it's a source of it. And they're challenging the performing arts to rethink everything from casting to choreography to the physical design of the stage. The performing arts and disability forms a complicated relationship. The performing arts have excluded disabled people physically and culturally. Physically, through stairs, narrow aisles, inaccessible backstage spaces, no captioning, no tactile wayfinding, no room for mobility devices. Culturally, disabled characters written as metaphors, non-disabled actors playing disabled roles, stories about disability without disabled storytellers. But there's also a counter-history. The National Theater of the Deaf President Now movement, disabled artists building their own stages, activists reshaping the law. These stories show that inclusion isn't a threat to artistic excellence, it's a path to it. So that's the landscape. It's not the full landscape, but it's a good slice. That's the history. That's the context for the work ahead. In the episodes to come, we're going to get practical. We're going to talk about what an accessible stagehouse actually requires, how backstage environments can support disabled technicians and performers, what accessible programming looks like beyond the basics, how policies, training, and culture shape inclusion, and how theaters can move from compliance to genuine belonging. Think of today's episode as the overture, the themes that will carry through the whole series. I'm excited to take this journey with you, and I'm Raymond Kent. Let's keep building stages where everyone belongs. Thanks for taking the time today to listening to Theater Operations Unleashed. We hope to see you next month.